Belize Watch. Knowledge of the past, impacting the present, building the future.
Reverend C. David Goff has positively impacted the lives of thousands of Belizeans over the last 4 decades. Our Belize Watch team sat down with Reverend Goff to look back at his over 40 years in ministry. He spoke of his childhood, his call to ministry, and his early days in the ministry in Jamaica. We will have that conversation after we take a break to hear from our partners, Belize Tourism Board, Shell Belize Limited, and the Barry.
We are the Barry, offering you great products, good service, and of course, the lowest prices in the entire country. Visit us in Belize City, Belmopan, San Ignacio Cayo, Orange Rock, and now in San Pedro, La Isla Bonita. The Barry. Get more? Be less.
Shell V-Power, with 3 times more cleaning and friction-reducing molecules. Go well. Go Shell.
I'm a Belizean traveler. Are you?
It don't matter what part of the jewel they come from. You da you and me da me. But guess what? All are we the one. See what I mean?
I'm at the home of Reverend C. David Goff, Charles David Goff. Reverend Goff, I've known you for many, many, many years. As I think for as long as I can remember myself, I have known you, or way back from when your dad was around. Your dad was Reverend Charles Goff as well, and my mother and your father were very good friends, and your mother were very good friends, right? You know, I can remember him coming to our home several times, and I can remember watching the 3 of them in long discussions and what have you at home. I can remember you coming there as well. Anyway, we could go way back and we could reminisce, but the idea here is to get to know you and to hear it in your own voice. So, Reverend Goff, let's start from the beginning. Let's start, who is Reverend C. David Goff? And let's, from the beginning, though.
Okay, thank you, Rene. And first, let me welcome you to my home. And it's good to have you here and to have the Belize Watch crew, Miss Ava and Chris. We're glad to have you with us here. Well, I am a Belizean by birth, although some persons sometimes think I am from Jamaica because I spent a significant part of my life in Jamaica. But I'm a born Belizean. But before I get to that, let me just say that my father, my late father, was the Reverend Charles Edward Goff, as you mentioned, Charles Edward Egbert Goff. Yes, he was formerly a teacher who became a Methodist minister. His last school was the Corozal School, Methodist school. He was principal, and my mother was vice principal. My mother was Alice Euphrosyne Luben, married name Goff. She was from Puerto Cortes.
Barrio Campo Rojo o La Curva? Which one of them?
Ya no sé.
Yo creo que es Barrio La Curva. Los Luben you would go to the church in La Curva.
Okay. Yes, yes. But I know that she was very proud of her Curtis roots. She came to Belize at age 10. And from then on, she lived in Belize, no? So my parents were once a teaching couple, and my dad became a Methodist minister. Went to Jamaica and trained for the ministry, and came back to Belize. Served in circuits in Jamaica, and then came back to Belize in 1957, and I was born in 58. I don't mind telling everybody how old I am.
The only secret, Rev. I still the older. Go ahead.
So my dad served in Stan Creek, what was then the Stan Creek circuit, still the Stan Creek circuit, but it was called Stan Creek Tongue then. I was born in Stan Creek Tongue, which is now Dangriga, and in the mission house, because in those days when the minister's wife will have baby, the midwife comes to the manse, to the mission house, and delivers the minister's baby, the minister's wife's baby. So I was born in the mission house in Dangriga, in Stan Creek, and so I opened my eyes. I always like to tell people I'm so proud of my Stan Creek, my Dangriga heritage. I said I opened my eyes to the sound of the drums of our fathers, of my father, in Dangriga, because as a little boy I remember being afraid of the junk canoe. When the revelers, when they came around, Christmas time, I used to hide behind my mother's frock tail, because I'm afraid of the mask and the dancing and the shells. I used to be frightened of that, But all of that is a part of my heritage. Being born there. And we weathered Hurricane Hattie there too. Mm-hmm. Yes, my dad was in Punta Gorda at the time, gone down and Heron H to do harvest at PG and couldn't get back. So we had to weather the storm. But thanks to the late former commissioner of police, Arturo Adelphos, he was then inspector down there in Stan Creek, who demanded that my mother must come with the children to safety. My mother felt, this is one big mission house, man. I don't need to come out of this. And Commissioner Adelphos, Inspector Adelphos, sent his officers back. I'm not asking you, madam. I'm ordering you. So we went to his rest house there with his family, and then after that we moved to the police station, and that's where we weathered Hurricane Hattie. So I have happy memories of down there of Stan Creek, and it's a part of my heritage, and I give God thanks for that special identity.
How old were you when you left Stan Creek?
I left Stan Creek at an early age, about 5 years old. Came to Belize City, to Chapel Lane, the lane behind Wesley Church. My father was posted to Ebenezer then as minister. And my dad, the Ebenezer manse had gone down in Hattie a few years before, because this is 63 now. So they were building the new Ebenezer manse, so we had to spend almost a year in the house on Chapel Lane, which is now the Wesley Preschool. It was a wooden structure then, it's now a cement structure. And so I went to Wesley School. Began at Wesley Infants under the late Lily Leslie, who was she might have taught you. She taught a lot of people. She was a sister of Sister Amy Leslie.
Yeah, I remember Sister Amy Leslie very well.
Right, well, her sister, I think Miss Lily was her older sister, and she was a teacher. And at the time when she taught me in kindergarten, she was retired, but she had gone back to help, And I can remember marching up with the boys, man, leading the boys in harvest up that great aisle at Wesley Church and getting up to the top, and my little fine voice singing for the beauty of the earth, and presenting our gifts. And taking part also in Tom Tom's wedding. I tell Natalie, my wife, she's my second wife, because I was married in the play Tom Tom's wedding. Under the late Ethel Daly, who was the principal. She used to like to put on these plays. Remember in those days, there were no TV, and we put on, yes, and the school children did some wonderful, they used to call it entertainment, variety shows, whatever. And in Harvey Hall, I took part in that, and I was the groom in the Tom Tom's play, So happy years. And then in 1964, we moved over to Ebenezer. The manse was then completed. And I then switched over to Ebenezer School.
Ebenezer School.
Ebenezer.
Dumpling squeezer.
I know you say rice bun scraper.
Because I used to go there too.
Man, when they said that, to Ebenezer children, when they had school children tease Ebenezer, man fight broke out, Yeah.
that was a nice thing.
No, you got Ebenezer, dumpling squeezer, fried rice bun scraper.
Yeah. Those were the days. Okay, so Rev, you had fun at Ebenezer, the dumpling squeezer school, and so did I, as a little boy too.
Where I was also in Boys Brigade, by the way.
Yes.
And that was a wonderful experience under Mr. Norman Bennett, who is still alive. He was our brigade captain, 3rd Belize Ebenezer Boys Brigade. Wesley was 1st Belize. And we had a wonderful time. It was those were lovely years growing up in Belize. As children, we made our own toys. Yes. We did our own, whatever we had to entertain ourselves, it was homemade and handmade, If it was a kite, we made our own kites.
Yeah.
And kite season, we went out flying our kites. You spin your top, all kind of things we did as children and occupied ourselves.
You couldn't afford on top, you make on top, not true? Yes, man.
And I remember running about with my Milo can as my truck or my bicycle wheel, as a little boy.
You used to backwater to Rev?
Backwater. Because Ebenezer in those days was a school chapel, the old Ebenezer school.
Wooden building, right?
Upstairs and downstairs. The primary school upstairs, infant school downstairs, but the upstairs on a Friday evening was transformed into church. And we, the boys and girls at Ebenezer, used to do that. And Monday morning, you transfer it back into school. Put back up all the blackboards, and there were no individual enclosed classrooms. It was just partitions, blackboards and so on. And that's the environment in which we learned, and we thrived, and we excelled and did well, even in those conditions,
Were you ever in the class that was on the stage? Remember there was a stage there?
There was a stage, yes.
I did class on the class.
There, no? And I was in the class on the stage downstairs too. Downstairs had a stage too. I was in, but I did Ebenezer up to standard 5. Because in 1970, my father was transferred to the Jamaica district. I think the Methodist Church must have decided that Reverend Charles Goff, you have worked practically all over this place. Where else to send you? We will send you now to Jamaica, which was really back to Jamaica where he began in 52, So back to Jamaica, and in 1970, and my dad did...
So you finished your primary in Jamaica?
Well, actually, I had to go from standard 5 straight to first form in Kingston at Excelsior, the Methodist High School, a big high school run by the Methodist Church, And because in Jamaica, you start high school earlier, 11, sometimes 11 plus, And I was already 12. So I couldn't go back to do that last day of primary school. I had to go straight and hurriedly sit that common entrance, for which I was ill prepared, and go straight on to first form. And the reason for that is that, remember now, in Jamaica they were doing 5 years, 1st to 5th form.
Yeah.
So that, and it's still that way in Jamaica. I think they do 5 years, and then, but we in Belize, as you know, we only do 4 years.
4 years.
So we enter a bit later. But we leave about around the same age as the Jamaicans would do, So that is it basically. And after schooling in Jamaica, right through to 6th form, junior college, I offered for the ministry. I heard the call of God.
When did you realize that you wanted to be a minister, and you said you heard the call of God? How was that manifested to you? How did God make that call?
Well, I will tell you, from I was a little boy, I used to love to play with my brother and my sister church and our neighborhood friends. We played church. And whenever we played church, I was always the minister, So I would take my father's preaching gong, his black preaching robe, and put it on, and I would be preaching to the congregation with my sister and my brother and our friends. And I remember once my dad was in his study working, and he heard us playing. And he came outside and he said to me, David, if you want to put on that gong later, you must take it off now. Go and do your work. Go and do your studies. Do your schoolwork. I'll never forget that. If you want to put it on later, take it off now.
And how was Mom taking all of this?
Well, my mom, being a teacher, she was very supportive. My mom wives in that era always defer to the husband, right?
Yeah.
My mom's favorite words, I will tell your father. The father was the one who administered the discipline, yeah. But my mother had a soft spot anyhow, She would say that, but sometimes she wouldn't. She would let it slide. And but we often thought, because my brother and my sister and I, when we were children and we wanted to go to Martini, whether to Palace or Majestic, or Eden, the Martini 5:30. We know that when it rained, they not send you nowhere. Because people of that era, they send you out when it rain. It wet, you can't go nowhere. Stay home in the rain. It's wet. Catch cold. And as a child, I used to watch the ground and pray that it dry up fast. But we would go and ask our mother permission to go, because chances are she would give in and say, okay, go, But that is the context. My sister, it was 5 of us in the family. My two older sisters, Barbara and Elizabeth, we call her Betty. She passed away. She was the guidance counselor at West College. She passed away in 2020, just before COVID. Barbara is the eldest one. She's a nurse. And she is now retired, living in England, where she's married to an Englishman, my English brother-in-law.
But you were the only one that followed that footsteps, right?
Yes, well, in a sense, yes. Even though Barbara, well, no, not really. Barbara is a local preacher in England.
Okay.
And Andrew, who is the last one, is a Methodist minister in the United Methodist Church in the States.
Okay.
He's in the Louisiana Annual Conference. And he's serving right now as the senior pastor at St. Luke's United Methodist Church in Shreveport, Louisiana. And he has served as district superintendent over there and all of that. So he's 5 years my junior, and very personable person. He loves to meet people, and he's gifted with dealing with older people too, the elderly. A gift that I don't think I have quite as much as he does, even though I love. I used to enjoy being with your mom and your aunts, and I enjoyed. Today I met two members from Burl Boom. And one of them said to me, she said, Reb, I just want you give me one hug. I want to hug you. It was good to see them, And
they got that hug.
Oh, yes. I tell her, I said I needed the hug as much as she did. But just to give you a quick rundown on my siblings, Barbara was born in Corozal when my parents were teaching up there. Betty the second one was born in Jamaica, in Falmouth, when my father had just finished training and was posted to Falmouth. And then he came back to Belize in 57. I was born in Dangriga. Pat, who followed me, was born in Sangriga as well. And then Andrew, the last one, was born in Belize City, Belize City Hospital. So, it's not an uncommon thing for Methodist ministers' children to have different nationalities per se in terms of where they were born, because it's an itinerant system that we move. It's an old John Wesley system, by the way. Yeah. We have Methodist ministers must move around. My dad served in Jamaica, and he served in Belize. And when he retired, he did a short 6-month stint in the Leeward Islands, on the island of Tortola in the British Virgin Islands, And I myself served out of Belize too. I served in the Bahamas prior to coming back home.
But when you got that call and you decided, this is it, I'm going to give in, I'm going to yield to the call and go on to study. Where did you study theology?
Okay, well, maybe I could just say about the call. In the Methodist Church and in the ministry on a whole, we speak a lot about the call. That one, it's not something that you should simply treat as a job and say, well, I'm going to be a minister. We refer to it as a vocation, and that one should feel at least called of God to this ministry. And when I heard the call, it was back in 1976. I was a young local preacher in Jamaica, and under the influence of my late uncle-in-law, Solomon Edmund Daly. Now, the older Belizeans will remember Mr. Sol Daly. He was one of the early educators who came from Jamaica in the 40s and early 50s. They were here. When he left in 63, he was, I think, Deputy Chief Education Officer or something like that, Mr. Sol Daly. He was married to my aunt, Mira, my mother's sister. And so he was the one who gave me the first opportunity to preach as a youngster. I was already in training for preaching, and one day he couldn't take an appointment at a big church in Kingston, fairly sized church, Saxtop, and he asked me if I would take that appointment. I was so thrilled. Little me, you know? And I went, and apparently I did a very credible job.
You remember what was the first sermon all about?
I hardly remember that sermon, but I remember the first hymn.
What was
Savior, blessed Savior, listen while we sing. Hearts and voices raising praises to our King. I remember one of my early messages, though, that I preached was a passage from Jeremiah, you know, that we let him who glory, we must glory in the Lord, you know, and not seek glory for ourselves. And I remember preaching several sermons, I mean, in different parts of Kingston as a young local preacher. My uncle-in-law gave me that start, and of course I was privileged to have access to my father's vast treasury of books in his study, and I enjoyed it. I decided then that I wanted to fulfill this calling. Now I must say something significant happened. That same uncle-in-law, Sol Daly, taught me how to drive. And he used to, right, exactly, and the steering wheel on the right hand side, steering wheel on the right, and you drive on the left. Uncle Sol would come for me on a Saturday morning, and would take me driving, and I really treasured that. That was such a good experience, you know, and the confidence and the interest he took in me to help me as a youngster, and it turned out that he met in an accident one Friday evening. His wife, my Aunt Mira, was in hospital, and he was going to pick her up and to bring her back home because she was being discharged. And on the way to the hospital, he had a blackout and lost control and crashed into a bridge. You know, Jamaica, Kingston has these big gullies, right? Thank goodness the car never go in the gully. But the steering wheel came in his chest, and he had some internal damages. And so the Friday evening, and by Monday morning, he was gone. He died. His death shook me up because I always had the idea that, yes, I want to be a minister like my father, but not now. I'm going to study law first. I'm going to be a lawyer. And then later on in life, I will offer for the ministry. But his death made me realize whatever you're going to do for God, do it while you can. Don't put it off. And so right that same month when he died, May of 1976, I made up my mind to offer for the ministry. And it took practically almost 2 years, the time of preparation. I didn't enter seminary until the September of 1978, 2 years later. I must tell you too that the January, I had to go before this august body, the Jamaica Methodist District Synod. Like 40-odd Methodist ministers sitting in front of me, you know. And I have to give an account of my call to the ministry, my conversion experience and call to the ministry. And then I'm questioned by them if they want to question me. Examined, as the church says, examined. And then you go outside and they will discuss and take a vote and say, will we let him in or will we allow him to, you know. And of course, I got in. Extremely. Oh, my goodness. My father got very emotional. My dad, he was so proud of me. He spoke on my behalf and spoke of me and the things he had seen in me from a child. And when the synod voted, they voted fully in favor to admit me, to accept me as a candidate for the ministry. And what will always remain etched in my memory is the person that the then chairman, who was the late Reverend C. Evans Bailey, he was the chairman of the district, he asked the late Father Hugh Sherlock, who was the first president of the Methodist Church in the Caribbean, and the man who wrote the words of the Jamaican national anthem, by the way. Father Sherlock, he asked him he was then retired and residing once again in Jamaica, to convey the decision of the synod to the candidate. So Reverend Sherlock, Father Sherlock got up and he spoke, and he himself got emotional. I'll never forget his words. He said, David, all of us you see sitting here before you have stood where you are standing now. And that has stayed in my mind, you know. And I remember it, So, and he gave me a handshake and welcomed me and told me that I had been accepted and I would be sent forward to the conference, and then hopefully from the conference to the United Theological College of the West Indies for training, which I did 4 years from 78 to 1982. And upon graduating in 1982, I was posted to the Bahamas, which is Bahamas, Turks and Caicos Islands.
So your first posting was Bahamas and not Belize.
Not Belize, because MCCA had a policy, as far as possible, they would send you away from your home district, no? I guess, which is a good thing, it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes you get to go back home, and especially these days, it happens more often that you get to come back to your home district. But in those days, you would go to another district so that you could get exposure, and then eventually you can apply to come back, as I did eventually. So I spent 10 wonderful years in the Bahamas. I was ordained over there at Trinity Methodist Church in Georgetown, in Nassau. I said Georgetown because my good friend and colleague who entered with me, Reverend Carl Campbell from the Bahamas, he was ordained 2 days after me at Trinity Methodist Church, Georgetown,
Guyana.
He was. So both of us were at Trinity. I was Trinity Nassau, and 2 days later he was Trinity Georgetown. And I give God thanks for the years I spent in the Bahamas. I went there and to cut my teeth in ministry and to learn a lot of things from senior ministers and from the lay people as well, and to be their shepherd. I served for 7 years in the South Luther Circuit, and then I went away for a study leave and did my master's and went back to the Bahamas. And then I served as superintendent in the North Luther Circuit in a place called Harbor Island. And then after that, during those years, Reverend Otto Wade then, who was my superintendent, by the way, in the Bahamas. He was my second superintendent. He had moved back to Belize and succeeded the Reverend Harold Gill as chairman of Belize.
Both of
Remember
them.
exactly. So when Reverend Wade became chairman in Belize, he sent and asked me, David, won't you come and work with us here in Belize as a Belizean? And I said, sure. My mother was getting advanced in age, and I think it would have been good for one of us to be near her. And so I applied for a transfer, which was favorably considered, and I came home to Belize in 1992.
Okay, before you get home to Belize, I want to go back to the Bahamas and ask you if there's any experience you might have had in the Bahamas which would be readily come to mind.
In the Bahamas, I was very much struck by the vibrancy of Methodism. It was a church that was alive, a church that was on the move. They had their youth department and youth workers apart from the ordained ministry. And I entered into this church as a minister and into the South Luther Circuit, where I had 5 congregations to look after. Now here am I, a young probationer. I remember I was inducted into that appointment by the Reverend Dr. Kenneth Huggins, who was the then chairman of the district. And that induction took place on my 24th birthday, 3rd of September, 1982. My birthday is 3rd of September, by the way.
Young 24-year-old Reverend C. David Goff.
Because I entered college at the age 20. I was one of the youngest students in college. So, and then from there, and it was a joy to see these older Methodist men, laymen and laywomen, who were so happy to have this youngster from Belize. I guess some of them never even know where is Belize, but of course I would have to tell them sometimes formerly British Honduras, and then they would say, oh, yes, they understand, they know, But it was a joy to be with them and to serve with them in that context, and especially in the youth work of that district. I was involved in camps, I was involved in local preachers training, I was involved in preparing candidates for the ministry. It was a wonderful experience. And then when I came home, I brought all of the experiences and resources with me to help the church and to help my work here. But to this day, if I set foot in the Bahamas, there are people who are so happy. Oh, yes. In fact, they used to, Rev, when you coming back? When you coming back to be our minister, And I have to say, well, But it was a wonderful experience. And I give God thanks for that. And I'm glad too that during those years when I served as minister over there, my father came and my mother came to spend like Christmases with us, with me, right? I wasn't married then. And we had a wonderful time. And it was, I think my dad enjoyed seeing his son functioning as a minister, and having his congregations and preaching and doing the covenant service, and of course I would invite my father up to assist, to share with me at the communion table, and all of that was so special. I must say that my father has the distinction, and I don't know if this is duplicated anywhere else in the Methodist Church in the Caribbean, but he has the distinction of having not one but two sons who have followed his footsteps into the ministry. Yes. And for that we give God thanks. The Lord is the one who calls. We respond to serve him as best as we can.
When you're talking about respond, I think when you are from a child, for some reason, when you choose a vocation like that, or when you're guided towards a vocation like preaching or announcing in my case, or whatever, you feel it from you're a child, right? And listening to you, I am amazed that I could relate to exactly what you're saying, that feeling that this is what you want to be is there from you, from childhood.
And it's there. And even when you get into your teen years, your adolescent years, and you might set your sights on other things, it is still latent, it is still there, and waiting to come to the fore. And that is the work of the Holy Spirit. It is the Holy Spirit who moves and calls and equips and sends us out. And that is why when a minister is ordained, the emphasis is on the work of the Holy Spirit. And that's why when you go to an ordination service, whether it's Anglican, Catholic, Methodist, you will see red, the color red. Everything is decorated in red and the ministers in red stoles, because we are emphasizing, red is the color of the Holy Spirit, by the way, the color of fire. And red is, we are emphasizing the work of the Holy Spirit in working in the life of the individual from birth, really, all your childhood experiences, and bringing you to that point where you can say, "Here am I, Lord, send me." As Isaiah said, "Here am I, Lord, use me." And that was the experience of John Wesley too.
Yes.
John had that experience in the burning rectory when he was 5 years old and he was rescued. And his mother felt, John, God saved you for a purpose. God has something for you to do. And you see what a great minister John became, and started the Methodist movement. And by the way, may I hasten to say that historians will tell us that without John Wesley and the Methodist revival and movement, the spread of Methodism in England, England might have gone into a very serious social upheaval, maybe a revolution, But John Wesley and that evangelical revival played an important role in 18th century England that helped. And to this day, we are glad that as Methodists in the Caribbean, we are the first area, people, I don't know how many persons know that. We are the first area out of England where Methodism spread to.
Okay,
So,
the Caribbean.
yes, so Methodism in the Caribbean is so very important to us as a people. And we give God thanks. And it's important to the Methodist Church too, worldwide, as we think back and look back on our heritage.
When we come back, Reverend Goff speaks of his return to Belize and how he met his wife, Natalie. We step aside to hear from our partners, Belize Tourism Board, Shell Belize Limited, and DeBarry.
We are DeBarry, offering you great products, good service, and of course, the lowest prices in the entire country. Visit us in Belize City, Belmopan, Sa Ignacio Cayo, Orange, and now in San Pedro, La Isla Bonita. DeBarry. Get more? Be less.
Shell V-Power with 3 times more cleaning and friction-reducing molecules. Go well. Go Shell.
and traveler. Are you?
It don't matter what part of the jewel they come from. You that you and me. But guess what? All are we the one. See what I mean?
So in 1992, you came back to Belize. So in 1992, you would have been how many
You mean
years?
age-wise?
Age-wise, like 32,
I was 34.
32, 34.
34. Because I was 24 in 82 when I
Yes, you're right.
started.
Yes,
I was 34
34.
and looking for a wife.
And you found one, right?
Yes.
But you got married when you returned to Belize, and you did not.
Belize, you know, in the Bahamas, I had opportunities, and there were girls I dated and had interest in. But I guess God knows why nothing came to fruition until I came back to Belize.
Yes. Tell us about the meeting, how you met your wife, and so.
A lady named Natalie Ewing, and I hope she's listening to me, because she was at Wesley active in the Methodist Praise Singers. You know that choir that the late Mrs. Alice Williams founded, and is now going still under the leadership of her daughter Sandra McKay. Natalie was a part of Praise Singers, and Natalie sat right in the front of in the front row as a soprano. And I want to believe I was up there preaching and couldn't keep me out of the choir stall sometimes. You know, glad to go over there, you know.
So you're preaching to the. Okay. Go ahead.
And so 2 years later, Natalie and I, after dating for a few months, a while, you know, I popped the question to her, and she accepted, she consented to be my wife. And we were married on the 2nd of July, 1994, right at Wesley. And guess who was officiated our wedding? The Reverend Otto Wade did the service. He did the marrying. The Reverend William Fox, you know, yes. He administered the sacrament of Holy Communion. And guess who did the homily? The late Reverend Dr. Claude Cadogan.
I was about to take the risk and say Reverend Claude Cadogan, because, as you know, Reverend Claude Cadogan is very close to me. He christened me.
I know, he christened you, and he christened me too.
He christened me. Yeah, we still have something in common.
And he was my godfather.
Yes,
He was godfather to the late B.Q. Pitts too. He was B.Q. Pitts, and I always used to share that, you know, we are both godsons of Uncle Claude.
And I still treasure, you know, he sent me a letter, and I still treasure a letter Reverend Claude Cadogan wrote me, you know, in his handwriting, you know, when he was well over 100 years old. Well over, because we were going
He died at 106.
106, yeah.
Yes. Reverend Claude Cadogan had a ministry in writing letters to young people and prospective candidates for the ministry. Maybe he had his eyes on you to be a minister.
Well,
Like
I would
like your grandfather.
My grandfather was also a Methodist minister.
Yes. The late
Reverend
James Alexander Christopher Elliott.
Right.
You know, great man and great Methodist minister. And so Reverend Cadogan took part in our wedding. I must say that I also had the Reverend Caleb Cousins as a godfather too.
Well, I'm familiar with Wester College. He was my principal at Wester College when I went to Wester College. Yeah.
And his wife, Mrs. Rose Cousins. So I have Reverend and Mrs. Cadogan and Reverend and Mrs. Cousins. Those are my four godparents. Unfortunately, they have all passed on to glory. But when I look back, you know, I say, David, you really couldn't escape the ministry. You know, you're born into the mission house. You go about it. I used to go about with my father to all the services, you know, everywhere. The earliest picture of myself, and I will try and locate that photograph.
Okay.
1962.
1960, you must be 4 or 5 years old.
Yes, I was about 4. The Methodist people in City River standing outside of the destroyed church. Hurricane Hattie destroyed the church. And the whole congregation outside standing up together, posing for this picture. And the minister is there, my father. It must have been, I don't know, because my dad wasn't really dressed as a minister, but he was there, and there was a little toddler in my little blue jeans pants, holding on to his pants, as it were, holding his hand, and that is me.
That's you.
You know, and so wherever my dad went, whether it was Grace Bank, Roaring Creek, Zion Park in Santana, I always went with him.
So you had
I
to follow.
tagged along. So I was sort of immersed in the work of the church and in the ministry. I couldn't escape it, you know. And even though I should tell you, I worked for 2 years after I left high school in Jamaica, and I did junior college. I worked with the government of Jamaica for 2 years in the Ministry of Labor and Employment as an internal auditor. And it was while I was serving as an internal auditor that I responded to the call and offered myself and sent in my letter of resignation to the civil service and went to train at the UTCWI, United Theological College of the West Indies.
No, here in Belize, you were assigned where when you got back?
When I came back in 92, I was posted to Wesley.
Wesley Church.
I succeeded Reverend John Smith.
John Smith.
Yes, I took over from him. John and I were good friends too. We're still good friends. And I was best man at his wedding in Jamaica. And so when John went on to the U.S. to study, on study leave, the church placed me at Wesley. And so I served, at that time, as I mentioned earlier, Reverend Wade was the chairman, Otto Wade. Yeah. And Reverend Ernest Belize, I don't know if you remember him, he was the secretary of the district synod. But within a few months, the MCCA, the Connection, which is a whole church in the Caribbean and the Americas, asked Reverend Belize to go to Guyana as chairman. So I came September, and by December, Reverend Belize was going to Guyana, and then the district asked me to sit in for him at the synod the January following as secretary, and then I was eventually appointed secretary. I served 8 years as secretary of the district synod under Reverend Wade first, and then Reverend Anderson, Reverend Dr. Leslie Anderson, and then I succeeded Reverend Anderson as head of the church, as district president, because we had changed it from the term chairman. We don't use that term anymore. District president, and so I was district president for 9 years. Right now, we also use the term bishop, because we have an episcopal system now that we embraced in 2015. So, you know, our current bishop is Bishop Bengoshe, right. We had Bishop Papalut before him. Papalut succeeded me, Bishop Papalut, and then Reverend Bengoshe succeeded Reverend Papalut. So it's been an extreme. So after doing 3 years at Wesley as superintendent, I was posted to the Ebenezer Circuit, and that is when I became your mother's minister, because I had Burrell Boom as one of my churches, and I can remember Sister Helen. Oh, she was such a lovely woman. Renee, you were blessed. You were blessed. You know, your mom, your dad, Mr. Arthur. Oh man, those are lovely people. And your aunts, you know, they were all lovely people. And I served as superintendent of Ebenezer for 14 years. And then I demitted office as president, because while I was president, and then moved back over into Wesley, where I was posted. And I did 13 years at Wesley after that, and then retired. A total of 41 years altogether.
That was a real calling indeed, to do 41 consecutive years as a minister. And I retire. Do you really retire? Right?
Well, you know, a lot of folks ask me that, you know. They say, Reverend Goff, I thought you retire. They will see me at a wedding, or they will see me at a funeral, you know. And I thought you had retired. And I have to say to them, well, you know, a minister gets in the British church, they say you sit down. They don't say you retire, you get to sit down. Well, you sit down, but you can't sit down forever. You have to be busy, otherwise you seize up, right? You become rusty. So you have to keep going and keep the mind lubricated, and keep offering. And Charles Wesley, all the hymn writers, well, several of the hymn writers speak of serving God, right through. Isaac Watts, all of them. And one hymn, I'll praise my Maker while I have breath, and when my voice is lost in death, praise shall employ my noble powers. My days of praise shall ne'er be past, while life and thought and being last, or immortality endures. So you never stop. You never stop serving God. You never stop being a minister. You never stop helping people. And it's a wonderful thing. And maybe I may have to stop when I get to the point where I start to put on 2 left-footer shoes and 2 different color socks.
But you won't stop.
Until then,
Yeah, until then.
while I'm able, I will serve my God as best as I can, because that is a privilege and it's an honor to do so. Once Christ has touched your life, he lays claim on your life. And it's not a claim for a certain period of time or a certain season. It's a claim for all eternity. You are his. As the hymn writer says, I found a friend, such a friend. Who can sever us? He says, no, nothing can. Life or death, and that is based on Romans 8, by the way. Nothing shall separate us from the love of God. Shall life or death, shall earth or hell, no, I am his. And he's mine forever and forever.
Now, Rev, you came back to Belize in 1991, but you were 92. You were born in Belize, right? You went. You told me to Jamaica, then you came. You went to the Bahamas after you were ordained, and then you came back in 1992 to live in Belize. Now so you have several memories of Belize. You have memories of Belize as a young boy growing up in Dangriga and in Belize City. You have memories of Belize when when you came back in 1992, and of course you'll continue living in Belize up until today. Let's look at these various memories. How have you seen the growth of our country over the years from your perspective, being in and out?
It has been quite a development in Belize. I can remember as a child living in Dangriga and coming up to Belize City to stay with my aunt Mira and Uncle Sol Daly at Stewart's Alley off Northfront Street. That's where they used to live.
I remember the house.
Yes. And I can remember coming up, man, and thinking Belize City was a big city. Goff and Dangriga, you know. Yes. The neon signs, the Coca-Cola signs, and the bright lights. Yeah. And I used to feel, wow, I was mesmerized as a little child, you know. So, and then growing up in Belize City, then going to Jamaica to live, and living in Kingston. Yes, living in Kingston. And noticing in Kingston was a big city. It's still a big city.
Still big. It was bigger than Belize City. Yeah,
yes.
Of course it is bigger.
So when I imagine now in Kingston, you have to take bus to go wherever you want to go because it's such a vast city. I used to take the bus to go to school, to high school in the mornings and come home on the bus in the afternoons. And when I came home in 1974 for a visit from Jamaica, I walked all over Belize. And Belize wasn't as big as it is now, Belize City. And I was so surprised. I said, but I grew up and this city was so big. But coming from Kingston, it seems small, you know. But I treasured my Belize. I was always proud, even in Jamaica, proud of my Belizean identity. When I went to Jamaica as a schoolboy of 12 years and they heard me speak in the school I attended, the children used to laugh at my accent. They said, where you come from? Little Cuban boy. Hey, you little Cuban boy. You know, they thought I was from Cuba, you know. And I had to tell them, no, I'm from Belize. Well, in those days, British Honduras, because this was before 73 when we became Belize, you know. And they said, well, but we never hear about that place yet. Which small island that is? I said, small island.
Yeah, they used to like
I said, let me tell you, because that's how the Jamaicans used to think, that anywhere out of Jamaica, any Caribbean, that was small island. Yeah. So which small island you come from? And I was proud to tell them, I am from the mainland. I am from Central America. And my country is twice the size of Jamaica. Well, when I said that, shut them up right away. Everybody shut up. They said, real, you know, and they realized that they had to themselves go and read up more about Belize and learn about Belize, you know. But and I've watched Belize develop. When I went to the Bahamas in '82,
which was another thing again, because that's the small, the island, lot of small islands.
Yes. And when I came back from the Bahamas to Belize in 92, I witnessed further development in Belize. And since 92, these past 30, what it be, 31 years now, I have seen even more development in Belize. That I don't know how some Belizeans could go away and come back, whether they go New York or wherever, and they don't see anything in the same Belize. And no, so, but I think that is being, you're hearing less and less of that now, because our Belizean folk in the diaspora, they are realizing that this country is on the move and has come a long way. We have a long way yet to go, but we have come a mighty long way. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to our leaders. And you know, I know we don't, sometimes we speak ill of our leaders, but we must respect all our leaders. The Right Honorable George Price, who we recognize as the father of the nation, father of independence. The Honorable Philip Golson, who was my father's first cousin. Two sisters' children, by the way. Yeah. The Right Honorable Dr. Manuel Esquivel. Yes, Sir Manuel, my good friend, yes. And the Right Honorable Said Musa, and the Right Honorable Dean Barrow, and the Honorable John Briseño, all of our leaders. And you know, I will tell you, Rene, politics is important and we can't live without politics, but politics is something that I hold a lot of respect for. Everybody is due their political opinion, but we must learn to live together in this country and respect each other's opinion and support whichever government or party in power for the advancement of our nation. That is so very important. And the Bible tells you that when you read in Romans, you know, you must really have respect for the governing authorities. You know. And so I give God thanks, and I've been able in these 33 years being home to work with both sides. You know, and whether it's blue or red, I respect both, and I give God thanks that I have earned and gained the respect of both. Yes. And both have honored me too. In due course, you know. So I'm grateful for that, and I work closely with them.
You said both have honored you. You want to talk about some of those honors?
Yes. Well, in early in 2002, under the leadership of the Right Honorable Said Musa, I was made a member of the most honorable, excellent order, of the British Empire, MBE, and then under the Honorable Right Honorable Dean Barrow, in 2010, I was made officer of that order, OBE, officer of the most excellent order of the British Empire. And also under the Barrow administration, I received the Order of Distinction for my services to religion and to the community. Yeah.
Excellent. So you've been recognized by both sides of the political fence, which is important, you know. And I'm happy you spoke about the importance of us respecting the authorities, the authorities of the day, and not because they were elected by the people anyway.
Exactly. And we in Belize, I always tell my people in the church, you know, when it comes to election time, you know, and things get hot and tempers run and emotions run high, you know, and I tell people, let us remember we are Belizeans. And you go into that booth for the 5 minutes or whatever to exercise your political franchise, your democratic right. But remember now, when you come out, whatever the result is, when the dust settles, we have to live together as brothers and sisters and treat each other with respect. If you don't see eye to eye with me, with my political views, we can still be friends.
That's okay.
We can still respect each other. And I don't know why sometimes we feel that we have to behave terribly, you know, and curse out other people and say all kind of unkind and distasteful things, you know. I always remember two members I had in the Bahamas, two ladies. Those two, they were from different families, but they were very close friends. But they were on opposite sides of the political fence. And I said to them one day, I said, how you all get along so well? Because politics used to be hot in the Bahamas, you know. What, under those days with Sir Lyndon Pindling? Hot. And I said, but how you all get along so well? They said, Rev, we don't discuss politics. And our friendship has remained a cordial one, close and cordial. And those two ladies are still alive today. Yeah. Thanks be to God.
Reverend Goff speaks on the church-state system in education and the importance of parents shaping the lives of their children. When we come back, we take a break to hear from our partners, Belize Tourism Board, Shell Belize Limited, and DeBarry.
We are Dibari, offering you great products, good service, and of course, the lowest prices in the entire country. Visit us in Belize City, Belmopan, Sa Ignacio Cayo, Orangeat, and now in San Pedro, La Isla Bonita. Dibari. Get more? Be less.
Shell V Power with 3 times more cleaning and friction reducing molecules. Go well. Go Shell.
I'm a Belizean traveler. Are you?
It don't matter what part of the jewel you come from. You that you and me that me. But guess what? All are we the one. See what I mean?
Rev, and another issue now, most of our educational institutions are church, state-run institutions, particularly at the primary level and at the secondary level as well. What are your thoughts about the church-state system of education practice here in Belize? Because it's not practiced much in other countries, as far as I know. I think we are one of the few countries, if not the only one, that have this church-state system still in place.
Actually, it used to be in Jamaica, Guyana, throughout the British Commonwealth Caribbean. It used to be. But in most of those territories, they have the government has taken over the schools fully from the churches. Belize then is perhaps maybe one of the few, yes, as far as I know. And I feel it has its problems, its challenges, but I think it's a very good system. It takes up a lot of our time in the churches, but I think for good reason. And I would hope and pray that this country never comes to the point where it throws away that system and the state take over the schools fully. The partnership we have in the church-state system should continue. The churches play an important role in giving that moral and spiritual oversight to the educational development of our children and young people, and I think that is very important. Now, I know there are persons who do not agree and who would agitate for a change and for us to shed that system. But I think if we do so, we'll be making a serious mistake. There are parts of the Caribbean now, I can tell you, that wish that they still had a church-state system because they knew the value of it. And they can, and those educators, they come to Belize, the politicians too, they come to Belize and they see what is happening here. We have Methodist clergy who come to share with us over here in the work of the church. And when they go to a harvest service in a Methodist church in Belize and see how all the school children come and march up and take part. You know, they take part in Christmas programs, in Mother's Day, you know, Father's Day and all these special occasions, and they see how the children are being groomed and molded, they themselves marvel at what happens in Belize, and they say, Belize, you should hold on to what you have, hold on to what you have. And perhaps some instances in which it needs to be improved and tweaked and made better, but it's, in essence, the church-state system is something extremely valuable. I would say invaluable, and we should try to enhance it and hold on to it. Yes, definitely.
A way or two that this system can be enhancing.
Well, I think currently what obtains is that government plays a very important role in the financial aspect of this whole relationship, and that is for good reason. The churches are not as able financially, they don't have the resources, but the churches have the skills in the management. And I think what would enhance it is if on both sides, government needs to allow the churches to do what they're supposed to do. And of course, on our side, the churches need to do their part and try not to fall down on the job. You understand? And we want to make sure too that even our teachers, we get teachers who have that regard for the church and who will encourage the children in their spiritual development. And I know that there are times when we have teachers who themselves may not be at the same stage in their faith development, but I know that our teachers, for the most part, are very supportive, and there are concerns, because I listen to the union, the teachers union, and the concern, they have for the, and perhaps some of their concerns are just, and we in the church, we have to listen, and we have to make sure, as I said, we do our part, and so each side must allow the other to breathe and to function and to do what you're supposed to do. It will be for the betterment of the young lives that are entrusted to our care, and ultimately for our development of our country, of this young nation of ours.
Well, Rev, we are talking about our children, about educating our children, but the family structure play a key role in education, right? So maybe I can get your comments. First of all, though, on your family, we spoke that you got married, and so you could tell me about your family, and then maybe we could extend then into how the role that the family plays in keeping in the upbringing of our children.
Yes. Well, I give God thanks. As I said, when I met Natalie and we became a team together, husband and wife, and God blessed us with a son, Christian David, in 1995, and Christian is now an adult, and he has studied in engineering, and he's also a very gifted young man. We treasure him, we love him dearly, and then we have Denzel, who is like our adopted son. Denzel is from Roatan, in the Republic, in the Bay Islands of Honduras. Yes, Denzel came to live with us when he was 12 years old, because he had some American sponsors over there who wanted him to come to Belize to get an English education. And on one of my visits as district president, they said, "Rev, we have a little boy we want to send to Belize. Can you help us find a family for him?" So I met this little 12-year-old who was very much, you could see that he knew where he wanted to go out in life at age 12. And Denzel came over. He lived with a family, with the Vaughns. Mrs. Sarah Vaughn is originally herself from Roatan. And then when Mrs. Vaughn retired and moved to the States temporarily to be with her daughter, Denzel came to us fully and has been with us ever since. He's now serving as a doctor. He did medicine at in Guatemala, University of San Carlos, and he's a doctor in Guatemala City. So we have Christian and we have Denzel, both young men. And if you see those young men together, you'd never realize they are not from the same womb. Okay. They get along so well. Growing up together, they both went to Wesley College. Denzel top PSC at Ebenezer. So did Christian, and they were both prefects at Wesley College. Christian went on to be head boy, by the way. And Denzel is gifted in biology and chemistry, and he helped Christian in those subjects. And Christian is gifted in mathematics and physics, and he helped Denzel in those subjects. So the two boys, and then Denzel was into football, coming from Honduras, Chris was into basketball. Denzel got Chris into football, and Chris got Denzel more into basketball. So the two boys, when you hear them talking, they are both avid fans of basketball and football. And I give God thanks. Natalie and I just love them, and we give thanks for them. Denzel has his family, of course, in Rotan, but his mom and these parents are so very grateful that we took him under our wing and helped him in his early development. So for all intents and purposes, he's our son. Yes.
No, the role that the key role that the family plays in the education of our children and ensuring that our children stay on the right track. Maybe you could speak to that and give some advice as to how families can, mold themselves or make themselves into what they should be for their children.
Right. Well, I'm sure you'll pick up by now that I have a certain sense of value for family life. Coming out of my own experience growing up in my parents' home, they give you that identity and that start in life and help you with your sense of principle and values. So I'm a firm believer in that. And in the church, I feel it's the same way. I've pushed family life, and I feel that in the wider nation, that the strength of the nation and the strength of the church too is really in the family unit. And I want to encourage parents and guardians as far as possible to play that important part, to take that role seriously and never abdicate your responsibility to someone else. A lot of parents abdicate their responsibilities to the schools and feel that the teachers must look after their children. No. Yeah. Parents need to play an important part. And if you look at children who are performing well in school, you will see that they are from homes where they have parental support. And I know that some parents have life hard, perhaps they have challenges, and they cannot maybe be there for their children as they would like. But the more they can do, the more they can sacrifice, the more they can try to be present and to be alongside their children, the better it will be for their children, for the whole family, and for this nation of ours. So if anyone listening or watching this Belize Watch tonight forget everything that I have said, please remember, I am a strong advocate, and I want to encourage all our families, all our parents and guardians to take seriously their roles and their responsibilities in rearing and molding and shaping the young lives that entrusted to their care. And that's the same I say for the teachers too. Because I want to speak now, if I may, Rene.
Yeah, to teachers, go ahead.
Yes, because I want to speak of the teachers I had in my development. People like the late Mrs. Marjorie Ling, who was the principal at Ebenezer Infant, the late Miss Ethel Daly, at Wesley Infant. And Mrs. Ling was that motherly kind of principal, and I give God thanks for her. I always remember her, and I had the privilege of being her pastor, by the way, and visiting her towards the end of her life, and preaching at her funeral. And I remember when I was a little boy going home in the rain, and in those days, Barrack Road used to get flooded. It wasn't built up as it is now. And I was going through the gate into the rain, children no longer playing in the rain. She called, "David Goff, come back in here." And she called me into her office. And remember now, she's a principal. And she came, she took a old Belize billboard, you remember billboard newspaper?
Yeah.
Folded it up, pushed piece down in the front of my shirt, and piece in the back. And she took another piece and she made a little hat. And put it, and she said, "Okay, now you can go." That is the motherly kind of approach teachers had to their children. The late Via Ford, Mrs. Cherry Stewart, who by the way is now 90, and I had the privilege of attending her 90th birthday celebration just on Saturday night.
Let's wish her all the best.
We want to wish Miss Cherry Stewart,
Cherry all the
Cherry
best.
May Shield Stewart, a happy 90th birthday. These are all teachers who played a key role in my life and helped me in my development, and I will forever be grateful to them. Mrs. Radiance Tatum, who was principal at Ebenezer, And one of my teachers too that you might not realize it, but there's a gentleman called Mr. Avery Rangai who retired from BL some time ago. Avery Rangai taught for 1 year in the Methodist system. He was from Forest Home in Toledo. And that 1 year he taught Standard 5 at Ebenezer, and I was in that class. And I give God thanks too for Mr. Rangai, for Miss Nora Maivit, who was the teacher, and Mr. Rangai was the assistant, These are all teachers who have impacted my life. And I want to encourage the teachers, whatever the concerns you have, the management, the church management, and I can speak for the Methodist management, we value your service and we appreciate what you do. But we ask you on the same hand to be as faithful, be as professional as you can, and do your job to the best of your God-given abilities in the interest of our children and our nation.
Rev, earlier when we spoke about parents. Now, what about so things do happen, and what about single parent who have to bring up a child? How should a single parent look at bringing up his or her child?
Right. Now, one of the phenomena in the Caribbean. We have so many parents, usually mothers, who are raising their children sometimes in the absence of a father. Of a mother. Well, it's a Caribbean phenomenon. Yes, it's a Caribbean phenomenon. Edith Clark looked at that in her book, which she entitled "My Mother Who Fathered Me," because you have a lot of mothers who are, for all intents and purposes, they are mommy and daddy to those children. You do have some instances too where daddy is present and mommy is not. And I want to encourage single parents. Again, take your responsibilities seriously. It is sacred. It's a God-given responsibility. And there are resources out there. There are agencies that you can turn to for help. We give God thanks for the Committee on Families and Children. And we want to encourage agencies like that. And even within the church, where we can encourage parents and support them. And don't ever feel that you can't do it or you can't cope or ever turn your back upon your children. And don't, as I said earlier, abdicate your responsibility to the school. The home and the school must work in partnership. And where children do well is where that partnership is alive and vibrant. Where parents attend parent-teachers meetings. When the school calls a meeting, you go. It is in the interest of your child to be present and to know what is happening. And don't ever feel that, I don't need to go to that. If you really want to see your child thrive and do well, take a keen interest in that child. And Natalie and I, as parents, that is our philosophy. With Christian and with Denzel, we have been alongside with them, supporting them and encouraging them. And that is so very crucial and important.
Maybe you could comment too at this point, Rev, on the importance of parents being examples as well to their children.
And that is something that we zero in on every year, all the time really, but especially when we're celebrating Mother's Day and we have those parents in church and Father's Day when they are there. Of course, I have a little bit of gripe even with us in the church and with the schools, because Mother's Day we praise up the mothers and Father's Day we bash the fathers. Okay. And I try not to do that. In fact, I've said to the churches on the mic here, the same kind of attendance and the same kind of nice, beautiful program you have for the mothers, I want to see it for the fathers as well. However, fathers, my word to you is that you must come. You must attend. You must be present. Yeah. Don't be an absentee father. Don't be a deadbeat father. Take an active part in the life of your church, of your child, sorry. So, the way ahead then is for parents and guardians to be wholesome examples. Children love their parents and they look up to mommy and they look up to daddy and they want to be just like mommy and just like daddy. Harness that by being good examples to them so that they can have a pattern that is worthy of emulating, worthy of following.
Now, Rev, all of us in our lives, we have had challenging and rewarding moments. Would you share some of those with us? Maybe let's look at the challenging moments first.
Okay. Well, looking back over my ministry these past 41 years, from the outset, I had quite a challenge dealing with hospital visitations. That's one. Two things. The first is hospital visitations. As a child, I just couldn't stand the smell of hospitals. As you enter the medicine, you smell that medicine, And I used to dread going to hospitals. And I had to overcome that when in college, in seminary training, we had to do field education, and you had to choose an institution to work with, whether it's a correctional institution or a hospital or a social agency, whatever. And I wanted to work with hospitals, so I chose to work at the University Hospital in Kingston, And I think that helped me overcome the phobia I had for hospitals. And now I can go to Carl Hushner, I go to BMA, Healthcare Pan, any of the hospitals, and I can feel comfortable. And when I went to study, and I did my master's, I did what is called clinical pastoral education also, and where you work as a chaplain in institutions and especially in hospitals too. And that further helped me to overcome that. So that was one of the challenges that I had. I now enjoy doing hospital visits. I had to work on it, and I had to put my mind to it and be intentional about it, The other one that I found challenging. So and the other challenge that I have had to deal with is ministering to families in the context of grief, where in bereavement, where there's a death in a family. That has not been an easy one, and I've had to overcome, my inhibitions in reaching out to people. I will tell you quite honestly, to this very day when I do a funeral, I get emotional too. Yeah. And I look back on it and I have concluded, I tell myself, well, that is good. That shows that you are human. I used to have a prayer on my wall. I must find it. It says, "Dear God, help me to remember, no matter what happens today, that I'm only human." Right? We are human. We feel sadness, and as our Lord himself did, the shortest verse of the Bible, Jesus wept. So we enter into the sufferings of others, and it's not easy standing in front of a congregation and leading in the worship in a funeral service. You see that bereaved family sitting in front of you; they are all choked up with grief, And you, as a minister, you have to offer them words of encouragement. We call the sermon in the funeral service the words of comfort. You have to offer the words of comfort, but you cannot do so without yourself feeling touched by the grief and the sadness. So that has been a big challenge to me, but thank God I am able to overcome it, and I am able to share meaningfully, and that is only by the grace of God, not my doing, God's grace.
But the only way you can overcome your challenges, Rev, and maybe you could expand on this a little bit more, is to face them head on. Embrace them. Don't feel like it's the end of the world because you have these challenges, but you have to accept that you have it. Because a lot of us have challenges, but we don't want to accept that we have challenges, right? The first thing in order to conquer a challenge is to accept that it's there, and then you can do something about it. Maybe you could talk a little bit, expand a little bit.
Definitely, because you don't want to run away from it. You don't want to be like the ostrich who runs away and buries its head in the sand. You want to face it and acknowledge, as you said, that it's there, and don't pretend that it's not there. As human beings, we are very good at sidestepping things and circumventing what we don't want to face. We have to learn to be intentional. And the God we serve is a God who enables and who equips. And when we make up our mind to serve as God is leading us and calling us, He provides, He makes the way. He provides the grace, the strength, the wherewithal. That sometimes you stand before a congregation and you don't know how you're going to do it, but you do it. You do it, but you don't do it in your own strength, but as the hymn writer says, in the strength that God supplies through His eternal Son. And God will always supply that strength when you lean upon Him. So I have made it one of my important things in life, perhaps you might say my mantra, to never sidestep or avoid a crisis or a problem. When you're facing it, deal with it. If you try to brush it aside or sweep it under the carpet, you make matters worse, because at the end of the day, it's still there, staring you in the face. So trusting God to guide me, and because of my faith, I've been able to move forward, even in those difficult situations.
When you talk about challenges too, how important is it to admit, like you have stressed the importance to admit where you're at, but a lot of us are maybe ashamed or have some inhibition in saying, "I'm sorry, forgive me."
Even the male species, we have a tendency to feel that we must always be this macho person, and we mustn't show emotions, you know. But I learned early from my father. I saw my father cry when his mother died. And my father taught me that you can be a man and feel emotions too.
Yeah.
You are not made of stone. You have a heart, you have feelings. And so never feel ashamed, never be afraid to accept or allow your emotions and acknowledge them to, the present. But at the same time, though, you don't remain there.
Yeah.
Because you move on because God always provides a way to strengthen you. And if you lean upon God, and you hear me say this over and over, leaning upon God, trusting God to guide you, moving forward by God's grace, because that I'm a firm believer in that. The challenges that seem insurmountable, and you wonder, well, how am I ever going to get through this? I would rather just go to sleep and wake up in the morning and pretend that it's not there. No. God helps you to face it. And the God who is with you on the mountaintop, as the songwriter says, in good times, is the God who is going to be with you in the valley.
Yeah.
Yea, though I walk through, says David, in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for Lord, thou art with me. Your rod and your staff, they bring me comfort. So it's a matter in which faith is very important, and your trust and confidence in God.
So, Rev, we have covered the challenges. What about the reward? What did you say would be the biggest reward you have received in life? Or not, you look back, you're retired now, you're at home. Well, when you say retire, I like for you semi-retired, right? You're at home, and you look, but you have a lot of time to reflect. And so what would be the rewards now that we have spoken about the challenges?
I would say overall, knowing that you are doing and you have done God's will as best as you can, Now, for me, looking back now, I get a lot of joy and satisfaction, and I have tons of thanksgiving to God. When I move around the community and I meet a young person or an older person who will say to me, Reverend Goff, it is so good to see you. You taught me something when you used to come to do church services at school, and you used to tell those stories. People always talk about the stories I used to tell in devotions for the schools. I was a difficult boy in school. Somebody told me this just the other day. I used to give a lot of trouble. Yeah. And one day the teacher brought me to you, and you spoke to me, and you helped me to get on the right track. Things like that I find very, very fulfilling. When I land at Philip Goldson Airport, when I'm coming in from abroad, and I meet an immigration officer or a customs officer, Reverend Goff, I remember you. I remember the impact you had on my life. That is priceless. That's priceless. And so when I sit back and I reflect, you're going to a government office, you're going to a bank, you're on the Albert Street, you meet somebody, and they will remember something you did for them or something you said to them that helped them and placed them on the right track. There's a little boy I always think about today, who shall remain nameless. He's a young man today. When he was in school, he was a handful, lots and lots of trouble, and the teacher brought him to me. And I worked with him, counseled with him. He had a lot of anger. And I watched that young man grow into a most respectful young man. He will never pass me on the street without hailing me. And he always let me know how grateful he is for the interest I took in him in helping to mold him in the time when his life was going through a crisis. I think, and I want to say this to everybody listening in this program, especially the adults, and especially the men, don't neglect the children and the young people. Don't take them for granted. Don't ignore them. But see how we can work with them and encourage them and point them in the right direction. And the key way to doing that, first and foremost, is to be good, wholesome examples to them. Because what you are speaks louder than what you say. Your words and your actions must match who you say, who you profess to be. And I think more children and young people need to see good, wholesome examples in the adults around them to help to encourage them to be responsible young people in their growing up.
You might have said it a bit before, but maybe before we leave, you can just expand on how do we go about solving some of the main issues facing our country today. You always hear about people getting at each other, people not forgiving and then taking revenge later on, and even killing one another. How do we get around all of that?
I think first and foremost, we have to recognize that each of us, no matter who we are, each of us is wonderfully created by a wise and a loving God. God has placed gifts in all of us, no matter who we are. And I have to appreciate you and respect you and treat you with respect and dignity as an individual. And I think for us in this country, we need to learn to treat each other with dignity and respect. We need to listen to each other, hear each other out. It doesn't mean we always have to agree. We may never agree with each other fully. But at least we can meet each other and we can treat each other with respect and with dignity. I think I yearn really for the time when we can sit down together. You are my brother. You are my sister. I love you the same. I love you. And I want what's best for you as I believe you would want what's best for me. And when we treat each other like that, when we approach things with that positive spirit, recognizing the worth, the God-given worth and value in every individual, I think it will help to make our society a better one, our country a better place, and our world a better world if we work together like that. Don't put anybody down. Don't be in this business of put down, speaking ill of people. My mother used to tell us, as children, if you don't have anything good to say about a person, then don't say anything. And I've lived by that. Try not to be berating people and speaking ill of people. I have had people who give me a hard time, even in the ministry, even in the churches. And it's unfortunate that they set out to do so, but I can meet them at the door of the church. I can shake their hand. I can smile. And I've had people say to me, Rev, how you could smile with that person? You know what that person said about you, and you know what that person is trying to do. It's not me. I'll say it like the late Mother Teresa said it. It's not me, but Christ who lives in me. Yeah. I can greet you. I can still relate to you because you are my brother, you are my sister, and I love you just the same.
That's the way to triumph. But what you have just said is embodied in one word, right? Love.
Love. Thanks for choosing love.
We say thanks for choosing love, Rev, because, love is really, you love God with all your heart and soul and mind.
Strength.
And strength.
And you love your neighbor as yourself. Yes.
That means you have to learn to love yourself.
Right? Those are the commandments that Jesus gave, right? And he says that a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, so you must also love one another. Yes. And so Jesus, and when you look at the life of our Lord, he taught us to love. He taught us humility. When he took the robe and the basin and he washed the disciples' feet, he taught humility and service. And that's why the basin and the towel to this day are the symbols of the diaconate, the ministry of deacons, because a deacon is someone who is called to serve. So the emblem of the diaconate is the towel and the basin. Going back to what Jesus did.
Wash his disciples'
yes,
feet.
Yes.
I mean, imagine he's going to his followers and washing their feet. I mean, come on.
Very, very important. Remember what Peter said? Important. Peter said, you are my Lord. You will never wash my feet. He said, Peter, if I don't wash your feet, you will have no part in me. Peter said, Lord, don't only wash my feet. Wash my head. Wash all of me. It's so important to strive for humility. And to allow God. You see, because, Rene, at the end of the day, in the final analysis, God must shine through in what we do. Yeah. I like to tell the story of the child who said, Mommy, the preacher confused me this morning. And the mother said, but what you mean? He said, Mommy, didn't the preacher say that God is bigger than us? And the mother said, yes, God is bigger than us. And did the preacher say God lives in us? Yes, God lives. Well then, Mommy, if God is bigger than us and he lives in us, shouldn't God show through in us?
Yes.
And the mother was speechless. Her child was so right. God should show through in our hearts, from our hearts. He should shine through in our actions. People should see that we have been with Jesus. And that's important. Humility. And as you rightly said a while ago, love. Love one another.
That's right.
Just to say, for me, looking back over 41 years of ministry, it has been a good journey. I cannot tell you that it has always been smooth sailing. It has had its challenges, it has had its bumps and kinks in the road, its hurdles and its obstacles. But one thing I can say, God has always been there. And I give God thanks for the people he has placed in my way on this journey. I see it as a journey. And he has placed lots and lots of persons in my way who have helped me, who have impacted my life. Going back to my parents and others, senior ministers and lay people, people like your beloved mother who I continue to treasure, Miss Helen, and the kind of person she was, the example that she set. Such a gentle person to talk with too, by the way. But I'm saying that, all of this, I give God thanks for the experience and that he has engendered in me a love for people. And this is why I do it. We love God because he first loved us. And Charles Wesley, in one of the hymns, tells us why we do what we do, why Jesus did what he did on the cross. He says, love moved him to die, and on this we rely. He hath loved us. We cannot tell why, but this we can tell. He hath loved us so well as to lay down his life to redeem us from hell. It's because of love. And so we must love one another and help each other. And if more of us would love one another and love each other in this country and in this world, our country and our world would be a better place.
That is why, Rev, that is why we say, Belize and beyond. Thanks for choosing love. You want to say it like me?
Sure. Belize and beyond. Thanks for choosing love.
Belize Watch. Knowledge of the past, impacting the present, building the future.
Celebration time. It don't matter what part of the jewel you come from. You that you and me that me. But guess what?